Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now. Have you heard of something called Protect IP? I know many of you have emailed me about this particular legislation as it's been going through both the House and the Senate. And to get more information out there, instead of me pontificating about something I don't know a lot about, we thought we'd call in a couple of area experts, Brian Rowe and Marcus Barnes-Cannon, to talk more in depth about what this is and how it impacts you.
My name's Brian Rowe. I teach here in the Seattle area at Seattle University Law and over at University of Washington's Information School in the areas of intellectual property, information privacy, social use of information. I also work on a national technology project to help nonprofits, legal aid nonprofits implement new technologies. And then I've been running a volunteer organization around intellectual property and human rights for about the last 10 years at this point. I got involved with it even before I went into law school. And this issue is really at the heart of a lot of the legal work that I did, both as a law student and then in a fellowship that I did as a Google Public Policy Fellow for a while.
So you're not just an advocate. I mean, this is what you do.
Yes. Yes, this is the type of area that I both do research and I do public policy outreach and speak with groups internationally on.
And again, this is Brian Rowe and Marcus Barnes-Cannon?
Yeah. I'm a third-year law student at Seattle University School of Law, and my focus is intellectual property. I'm really interested in privacy, technology, and intellectual property and sort of where those three coincide. So this fits squarely into that.
Yeah, it's basically a set of legislation that started as an international negotiation between countries, theoretically on how to update laws and cut down on piracy. But what it really has been is a set of tools for the content industry to control the technology industry. The things that it has been billed as by the sponsors of the bills is nowhere near accurate compared to what the bill actually does. And the bill really changes how the internet service providers, search engines, and those of us who create media online would interact with media.
Really? So it could change like how I would do things?
Yes, fundamentally, because it takes what would be traditionally free speech things, such as the ability to link to content somewhere, and regulates that. What happened generally is when you put out a link, you're basically saying this is a sign and there's something over there. And you're pretty much in the free speech area of it. Somebody can go over there and look at that. But with Protect IP, it takes those links and monitors it. And the government can put together a blacklist that says don't link to these things. And then if you link to them, you can end up with copyright infringement problems.
You can essentially then, or theoretically, you as a government official step in and intercede in digital publishing?
Actually, yes. I mean, directly, the AGs, attorney generals, are given the power to step in and ask internet service providers or search engines not to list particular content. And this is opposite of really the free speech the internet is built on. When somebody says something out there that you don't like, the answer to it should always be more speech, not censorship. And this changes that norm to removing the content or the particular possibly infringing sites, and instead of competing with them in some way. And why this is really troubling is a lot of the really cool technologies we all love have dual uses. Some people use them for political advocacy to get messages out there, and other people use them for infringement. But the actions that can be taken against them are going to act in a blanket way that removes that content and possibly even opens those sites up to massive liability.
How did it even really come about, though? I mean, it just sounds asinine to someone who's been, online, since, pretty much before the commercial internet. This is just outlandish.
Well, what happens in the international negotiations is they bring what they call diverse stakeholders together to discuss this. But when they say diverse stakeholders, they assume that because you've got the MPAA and the RIAA that you have diversity. They don't bring Public Knowledge or Electronic Frontier Foundation or Google or Yahoo or startups to the table. So those of us that are creating the innovation online were never brought into the international discussions for what needs to happen policy-wise to update the law. And I agree, intellectual property law is horribly out of date for the internet. I mean, we've got these laws that apply to printed books that they're trying to apply to bits. And it does need to be updated. But you need to bring those of us who are creating innovation to the table if you want something that's going to do anything else but act as censorship.
So then why weren't you brought to the table? I mean, do you not shower or like, I mean, is there... there's got to be some cogent explanation.
Well, I think the cogent explanation comes from Lessig Lawrence Lessig, when he talks about really the lobbying money that is put together. The USTR, the U.S. Trade representatives have a group of individuals that deal directly with intellectual property, but it has only been the traditional rights holders, your movie studios, your labels that are there. And the internet, the people creating stuff is no longer those traditional entities. It's all of us. Each of us can easily create content, put it up online. We're no longer these passive automatons just listening to media. We are the creators, and we don't have a stake in those traditional outlets that the USTR and other groups listen to. When I was at Public Knowledge 2 years ago, we lobbied in the nicest possible sense of the word. We didn't give anyone money. We actually went to organizations and tried to inform them over why it would be a good idea to get a seat for the American Research Library, the ALA, those type of groups on those intellectual property bodies that inform the government when they're doing these international negotiations that later turn into domestic bills.
So then how far along is it? Are we like dangerously on the precipice of just an implosion? Because that's what it would be.
Sort of, kind of.
We're close?
Yes.
We're close in the sense that, so you have two versions of the bill, one in the House and one in the Senate. The House version is actually co-sponsored by the majority of the people who are sitting on the committee that would send it to the floor of the Congress. So in that sense, there's a decent chance to almost an absolute certainty that the House will pass something. But the Senate's version of the bill has been held up by a Democratic senator from Oregon, whose name I constantly forget. Ron Wyden. So it seems like the Senate version is facing a bit more of a hurdle. But if a version comes out of the House and makes its way to the Senate, they'll end up considering that version as well. Mm-hmm. So there's the possibility that we could see something like this before the end of the legislative session, but there's also a possibility that it may not make it out to the next legislative session.
I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, we're a lot closer to possibly seeing something like this passed than we've seen orphan works legislation or some of the other things that have been talked about over the last few years, because we have workable versions in both the Senate and the House.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So what can we do, I mean, to stop this, to keep this from happening? I mean, yes, email or call your representative. Yes, that's fine. But it just seems to me a greater amount of awareness needs to happen as to why this is potentially detrimental, specifically to the internet as we know it.
No, and I think the outreach is great to senators, legislators, that type of thing. But there actually needs to be a lot more creation of content explaining how this affects individuals. What are the things on your blog that you link to or that you deal with that could potentially be censored? And a lot.
So give me an example of like how the average person, Joe Dokes, how this would impact him.
We've seen what happens when the government tries to intervene this way in the last year. ICE, Immigration, and Department of Justice decided to start taking down some websites from probably industry pressure, although we're not sure. And one of the things that they decided to do was take down a bunch of what they thought were large infringing sites, and some of those were major rap review blogs, where you've got rap artists sending files to the bloggers so that they will blog about them and post them. And then you have lawyers for the same companies going to the Department of Justice asking them to pull down these websites. So you have ridiculous policies where the lawyers on one side are going to the government, and the government decides to act and pull the domain names of these rap review sites when the artists clearly want to be reviewed and they want to be out there. I mean, we don't want the AGs, attorney generals, intervening, because a lot of the stuff that we give away as viral marketing is technically infringing according to the law. And a lot of us who do any type of book reviews, music reviews, remix work on YouTube, a lot of that stuff is all directly infringing. If you take a song, cover it, do karaoke, that type of stuff over it, post it up from a birthday party, that type of stuff could also end up on these blacklists.
So then which idiots are in support of this bill? And by idiots, we're talking either individuals, large corporations, big media.
I mean, we definitely have a lot of the content owners who are in support of this.
But dude, I'm a content owner.
You're right. I'm using old school language because we are all content creators and content owners. And it's not really it's not the creators. It's these groups that have bought content from someone else and just kind of hold it. I would call them these middlemen that are trying to maximize some limited right that they have, but don't actually have concern for us, the artists.
Right. I think it's sort of, you're seeing groups whose, like their business model is being undermined by the internet. And so to me, it seems like an attempt to re-entrench themselves in like the media space so they can continue to generate a profit without actually changing what they're doing. Because a lot of the entities that you see involved in this, like the RIAA or the MPAA, are continuing to pursue the same method of putting content out for the consumer, and they're not really updating that to reflect what the day-to-day reality is of how people use the internet and what types of things people are doing on it.
So we should stop linking in protest. We should start linking in protest. We should.
No, I think we should definitely continue to link, and we should continue to do business the way that we are, because the norms of sharing information is what makes the internet really work there. But I think we need to take examples of, let's say you do a video game blog and you go through and you review video games with some gameplay there. Whoever owns that game would then be able to possibly blacklist your site there, and pointing out that, yes, you're possibly infringing, but you're also doing something that should really be considered fair use, that should be considered your protected First Amendment speech rights online, and that you don't want the government meddling with that. You don't want to give them more powers to remove that.
I'm sorry. It sounds like it's screw IP rather than protect IP. I mean, from my perspective and the way you're explaining it and what I do understand in a limited capacity of what's happening.
I mean, it's really trying to limit the amount of speech that's there, limit the links, limit the distribution. I mean, and it's also really screwing with the open nature of DNS by getting sites unlisted and removing what we really see as the credibility of being able to link to and directly go to sites.
So is there really any way we can get their attention? I mean, continuing to publish and talk about it and getting the word out about what this is, but they got to have a wake-up call. I mean, what's the call to action? Torches, pitchforks, videos about torches and pitchforks.
I think that also pointing out the content that other people do that is possibly threatened by it, the things that you enjoy on a daily basis that's threatened by it. Because a lot of people that I talk to who use the internet in that way of taking content, remixing it, transforming it, don't realize that they're going to end up on one of these blacklists, and they're going to end up with some type of a letter that comes to them saying, you really need to license with us, even though we probably have questionable rights claims to what's going on, in order for us not to go after or have your site removed.
And I think there's a lot of space in there for negotiation between the two sides, because obviously it's legitimate to try and protect your rights and sort of say, well, you've got websites like the Pirate Bay or whatever that allow people to infringe my copyright. That's not okay, but there's no reason to use basically a hammer to solve a more delicate situation. So if we can show the content or some of the content providers that, what you're aiming to do is going to stop people from actually using your product. I write a video game review. I put some gameplay in there. You take down my site. Well, those are people who are reading my blog that aren't going out to buy that video game because I reviewed it favorably. So there's a lot of space where we can dialogue with the entities who are supporting this legislation and say, look, we understand what you're trying to do. We respect what you're trying to do, but there's another way to accomplish it that will accomplish both of our goals.
Well, and I think there's a lot of area here where intellectual property law needs to be updated. Mm-hmm. And bringing forward some of those things as areas that we're willing to work on, may help get some of those stakeholders to actually talk to us. I think the biggest problem myself right now is orphaned works, those things where it's out there, you don't know who owns the rights. You would really like to clear the rights to use it commercially, to resell it, to adapt it in some way, but there's no easy way to do that currently. And I think that if we can bring those type of issues into it, then we'll get a lot more stakeholders and come up with some decent legislative solutions instead of these one-sided hammers.
So, some action items. If someone who has no idea what's going on with this is to walk away with anything, what will it be?
So, 3 things. Number 1 is point out some of the content that they've got on their own site that could be harmed, blacklisted, removed, that they wouldn't be able to talk about under this. Second, put together something that says that they understand that the law is out of date here. It needs to be updated. And third, we really need better solutions out there. So find either a proposal or come up with something for updating it and start that dialogue about how we can rationally update intellectual property law to reflect the digital medium we're in. We haven't had a rational intellectual property law passed that actually listened to us, the users and creators.
And a website or a series of websites where they could get more information before those websites themselves, come under attack and are taken offline.
Yeah, the absolute best one that's covering Protect IP right now is publicknowledge.org, small nonprofit out in the DC area that is directly advocating on this. I worked as a legal clerk there after law school, and they work with a coalition of individuals, a lot of them from tech, a lot of them from academia, but also trying to come up with solutions there. And they even have some model legislation that they've talked about over the last year on how to update the Copyright Act.
I've worked with, I believe, Art over at Public Knowledge, specifically in relation to Andre Vrignot, the Seattle area resident who was kicked off of Comcast for a year, to try to change how someone might be I guess eliminated from accessing something that they should be able to access for something that was a relatively arbitrary policy by a private institution that's there to allow them to access everything online.
Yeah, another excellent resource is Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF.org. They've got a good amount of resources on what's going on. They track what happens legislatively, and when they find decent solutions out there, they publicize them, blog about them actively. They're out of the San Francisco area, but also have people in DC.
Well, thanks, guys, for spending some time and getting the information out there to raise awareness. That's what we're supposed to do. Get everybody to better understand what's happening and really why this isn't a good thing.
Yep.
Right now.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah, thank you.
I also really wanted to thank Marcus because he was a research assistant for me this summer, and Protect IP was one of the specific projects he worked on. Did some great work for me, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.